You're standing inside the Imperial Palace of Rome on the last night of 192 AD, and a woman named Marcia is holding a cup of wine, staring at a tablet that just changed everything, because written on that tablet is a list of names scheduled for execution at dawn, and the first name on that list is hers, and the man who wrote that list is currently stepping out of his bath 10 feet away. And if he sees the fear on her face, she will not survive the night, and what she does in the next few minutes will end one of the most savage reigns in the history of the ancient world. But before we get to that decision, you need to understand exactly what kind of man Commodus was, because the version you saw in Gladiator was a version Hollywood could put on a screen, and the real man was something far worse. And if you want history told without filters, Vile History is the channel for it. So hit subscribe now, because what comes next will genuinely disturb you. It starts when Commodus is 11 years old, standing in a marble bath inside the Imperial Palace, and the water is not hot enough, and any child might complain, but this child orders the servant responsible thrown alive into the furnace that heats the water, and the servants know he does not yet have the authority to execute anyone, so they throw lambskins into the furnace instead, and the wool catches fire and the fat crackles and the smell of scorched flesh fills the corridor, and the boy pauses, nods to himself, and sinks deeper into his bath, satisfied that a man has just died screaming on his orders, and that moment is not a turning point. It is a revelation, because the cruelty is not something that develops later. It is already there, fully formed, waiting for the day when no one will throw lambskins into the furnace to protect the people around him. His father, Marcus Aurelius, knew it. The most respected philosopher-emperor in Roman history spent his life hiring the greatest minds in the empire to educate his son, took the boy on military campaigns, wrote obsessively about discipline and virtue, and Cassius Dio, who lived through everything that followed, recorded that only one thing prevented Marcus Aurelius from being completely happy, that after educating his son in the best possible way, he was deeply disappointed in him. And when Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, Commodus was 19, and from that day forward there were no more lambskins, no more pretending, no one left to protect the world from what he really was. He did not want to govern Rome, he wanted to be worshipped by it. He declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, had the 100-foot Colossus of Nero beheaded and replaced with his own face, renamed Rome after himself, renamed the Senate, renamed the months of the year, and then chose the arena to prove he was a god. He fought in the Colosseum over 700 times, and every single fight was rigged, his opponents given wooden weapons or no weapons at all, some drugged, some chained. Commodus, fighting with real steel against men designed to lose, charging the government 1 million sesterces per appearance, 700 million sesterces drained from an empire already crumbling. And the money was not even the worst part, because the worst part was what the senators were required to do, forced to sit in the front rows and chant specific rehearsed mandatory words, and Cassius Dio recorded the exact phrase, "You are Lord, you are first of all men, most fortunate you win, and you will win. From time everlasting, Amazonian, you win." Think about what that means. You have commanded armies, you have governed provinces, you are a senator of Rome, and you're sitting in the front row of the Colosseum with sweat running down your face, screaming praise at a man beating a chained, drugged opponent, knowing that if the emperor glances at you and your mouth is not moving, your name goes on a list and people on lists do not survive the week. This happened 700 times across 12 years. But rigged fights were not enough, so he ordered soldiers to gather disabled men from the streets, had serpent tails attached to the stumps of their legs, gave them sponges instead of weapons, then entered the arena dressed as Hercules, and beat these men to death one by one in front of 50,000 spectators who cheered because they had no other choice. One afternoon he killed an ostrich, picked up the severed, bleeding head, walked slowly toward the tribune where Rome's most powerful senators sat, and held it inches from their faces one by one without saying a word, just staring, grinning, searching their eyes for any sign of disgust. And Cassius Dio was sitting in that tribune. He was there. He saw it happen. And he wrote that he tore a piece of laurel from his crown and shoved it into his mouth and chewed desperately, because whatever appeared on his face would kill him. And here is where you need to stop, because historians label Commodus a tyrant and move on. But what does it actually feel like to live inside a palace, where that man decides whether you breathe tomorrow, where he grabs real scalpels and cuts into living members of his own household, watching blood pour from wounds with genuine fascination, where Lampridius recorded plainly that he went so far as to bleed men to death with scalpels, and called it practicing medicine, where 600 people assembled from every level of Roman society exist solely to be used with no exit, no appeal, no voice, because silence is the only thing keeping them alive. That woman is Marcia. She has poured his wine every night for almost 10 years, and she has survived this long by being invisible, by being useful, by never giving him a reason to look at her the way he looked at his sister Lucilla, who sent an assassin to kill him in 182, whose assassin lunged and shouted, "The Senate sends this to you," which gave the guards time to react, and Lucilla was sent to Capri and executed, and that was not enough. So Commodus turned to his remaining sisters, daughters of Marcus Aurelius, women raised by philosophers, and corrupted them in ways historians described with a single word, a message delivered through the bodies of his own family saying, "There is no bond I will not break, no line I will not cross." And then his wife, Brutia Crispina, who had survived 10 years beside him, was accused of adultery with no witnesses, no trial, no defence, sent to Capri, executed, and after Crispina the paranoia consumed everything, senators dragged from their homes at night, heads on pikes, bodies in the Tiber, entire families erased, and the only pattern across 12 years was a cycle of suspicion and death that consumed everyone who got close, until the night a woman found her name on a list and decided she had survived long enough. So Marcia finds Letus, head of the Praetorian Guard, and Eclectus the Chamberlain, and she shows them the tablet, and 3 people with 1 list and no time make a decision. She prepares the wine the same way she always does, same cup, same pour, but tonight she adds a poison she has kept hidden for exactly this kind of moment, because when you live beside a man like Commodus, you learn to prepare for the night your name appears on a list. And Commodus steps out of his bath in a good mood because tomorrow is his day in the arena, and he takes the cup the way he has 1,000 times and drinks, and within minutes the colour leaves his face and he begins to retch violently. And here is where the story takes its most terrifying turn, because 12 years of arena combat have built something a single dose cannot destroy, and if this man survives the night, none of them will see the morning. So they send word to Narcissus, the emperor's own wrestling trainer, a man who has fought Commodus hundreds of times and knows exactly how strong he is and how weak he is now. And Narcissus walks through palace corridors that Letus has deliberately emptied, and the only sound is retching behind a closed door. And he enters, and the most powerful man in the world is on the floor barely conscious. The man who renamed Rome after himself, who beat defenceless men to death in front of 50,000 spectators, trembling on cold marble, unable to stand. And Narcissus wraps his hands around the emperor's throat, and Commodus opens his eyes and understands, and he tries to grab the wrists, but the strength that killed 100 lions in that arena is gone. The poison has drained it, and the man who forced the entire Senate to scream his name cannot scream for help, and it lasts seconds, not minutes. Commodus dies on the floor of his palace, December the 31st, 192 AD, 31 years old. The Senate voted immediately to erase him, drag the Gladiator with a hook, tear down every statue, remove every plaque, rename every arena, and Rome became Rome again. Though his successor lasted 86 days before the Praetorian Guard auctioned the title of emperor to the highest bidder, and 5 emperors followed in 12 months, and the empire never fully recovered. And Marcia, the woman who ended it, was executed in 193 AD. The woman who stopped one of Rome's worst emperors met the same fate as every other woman who touched power in that world. Rome did not build her a statue. History barely remembers her name, but here is the question I keep coming back to, and I want you to drop your answer in the comments. Was what Marcia did an act of survival, an act of justice, or something else entirely? Because she did not act to free Rome. She acted because her name was first on a list, and yet the result was the same. And that tension between selfish survival and accidental heroism echoes through every political assassination in the ancient world. For 12 years, an entire empire lived at the mercy of a man who had none. Senators forced to worship him while he played gladiator, women bought and discarded, the disabled dressed as monsters and beaten to death for entertainment, his own sisters used as a warning, his own wife executed on a fiction, and the only person who stopped it held no army, no title, no power, just a cup of wine, a decision made in minutes, and the knowledge that if she did nothing she would be dead by morning. History calls Commodus an emperor, but he was also a boy who smelled burning lambskins and felt only satisfaction. A man who measured his greatness by how completely he could humiliate everyone around him. And a god who died on a cold marble floor unable to form a single word, while the woman he planned to execute before sunrise watched from the doorway. If you want more stories about how power really worked in the ancient world, subscribe to Vile History and turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me which historical figure's final hours you want investigated next.